My name is Nathan Whitman. I'm 32 years old. I live in San Francisco now, where startup founders drink cold brew like it's oxygen, and the skyline glows like ambition on steroids. But if you think I'm one of those tech bros who built an empire from his dorm room, think again. I built mine with nothing but an old leather notebook and a scar so deep I stopped believing in family by the time I was 14. People call me a genius, a pioneer. But what really drove me wasn't innovation. It was revenge. You see, when I was a kid, my mom threw me and my little sister out like trash. And then, years later, she came back begging for help. Let me tell you why I didn't say yes. The fog outside my penthouse window rolled in thick that morning. San Francisco was dressed in gray and gold, the bay flickering beneath. I stood there with the same coffee I barely ever drank, watching ships cut quietly across the water, wondering how I got here. Behind me, on the shelf, was the notebook. Cracked leather cover, a burn mark at one corner. My initials scrawled over old equations and hand-drawn systems. It was my inheritance, not from my father, who died too soon, but from a man who loved science more than people my grandfather. Harold Whitman. The world only remembers the ones who win, but it forgets those who bled first to build the bridge. I walked over, picked up the notebook, and opened to a page I'd dog-eared 1,000 times. Written in my grandfather's crooked handwriting, if they shut the door. Build your own house, and make it fireproof. I didn't build just a house. I built a fortress. But to understand how I got here, you have to go back with me to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Back when I was still Nathan Ellis. I was 11 when my father died. He was a doctor. Kind-eyed, hands always warm. He smelled like spearmint gum and antiseptic. He used to pick me and my sister Lily up from school with jazz playing in the car and say, "Let's go home. Kids, Mom made lemon pie." That spring afternoon, the sky was gray and low. He walked into the house holding his chest, no jokes, no smile. He collapsed in front of us. It was the first time I saw my mother scream. The sound cracked something inside me. That night, I stared at the hospital ceiling in silence, waiting for someone to say they made a mistake, that he'd wake up. He didn't. My mom, Rachel, wasn't the same after that. Her golden hair dulled. Her eyes, once full of warmth, turned glassy. Lily was 8. She kept asking, "When's Dad coming back?" I couldn't answer. I just held her tight. For a while, we survived in silence. The house on Cedar Lane stayed frozen in time. My mom stopped cooking. I started microwaving soup. We did our homework alone. Then, 3 years later, she brought home Mark. He was nothing like Dad. He wore slick suits that didn't fit quite right. He smiled too wide. His cologne clung to the curtains like mildew. He called me kid and looked at Lily like she was an inconvenience. That's when I started writing letters to my mom. I didn't give them to her. I just folded them into a shoebox under my bed. "Dear Mom, I miss you. I miss who you used to be. I don't know who you are anymore." She never read them. But somehow, I needed them more than air. Then it happened. One evening, she called me and Lily into the living room. Mark stood behind her like a lawyer at sentencing. His hands were on her shoulders. Possessive. "I think," she said, "it'd be best if you and Lily went to stay with your grandparents. Just for a little while." I remember the exact words I said. "But this is our home." She couldn't look me in the eyes. "I need space. Nathan, Mark and I, need a fresh start. That's when something broke inside me. Not a loud break. A quiet, hollow one. Like when a branch snaps in deep snow. I looked at Lily. She clutched the raggedy cloth doll Dad gave her before he died. Her lip was trembling. I said, "Okay, Mom, we'll go." I don't know how I said it without screaming. The next morning, Mark drove us in his old red truck. My mom sat in the front seat, staring straight ahead. Lily and I were in the back, hands clutched like drowning kids. When we reached the old wooden house in the middle of cornfields, Mom turned and hugged us. Once. Quick, cold. She said, "I'll visit soon." But her eyes said she wouldn't. Then she got back in the truck. Mark honked twice. She didn't turn around. And that was the last time I saw her for almost a decade. My grandparents were different. Margaret had kind hands that smelled like cinnamon and lavender. She baked cookies every Thursday and sang old folk songs to Lily at night. Harold was the opposite. A former scientist turned bitter recluse. His study was off limits. His rules were law. He never smiled, never hugged, barely spoke, but he never lied. And in time, I came to prefer that over broken promises. On our first night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The wallpaper in my room was peeling at the corners. A cricket chirped from somewhere near the window. Lily whispered, "Nate, are we staying here forever?" I wanted to lie, like I always did. Instead, I whispered back, "I don't know." I rolled over, reached under the bed, and pulled out the shoebox. That night, I wrote another letter. "Dear Mom, I didn't cry today, but Lily did. I think she still believes you'll come back. I wish I did too." I folded it slowly, placed it in the box, shut the lid. The next morning, Grandpa Harold knocked on my door at 5000 "Up," he said. "The world doesn't wait." I dragged myself up, barefoot on the cold wood floor. I didn't know it yet, but I was stepping into the fire, because what came next would shape the rest of my life. And I wasn't ready, but I had no choice. Next time, I'll tell you what was behind that locked study door, and how I found a path to fight back armed only with equations and rage. Stay with me. You're not going to want to miss this. Grandma Margaret's house smelled like cornbread and old pine floors. You know the kind where the floor creaks every time you take a step, as if the house is whispering stories it's carried for generations. Lily and I stood on the porch with our duffel bags dangling at our sides. I remember her looking up at me with red eyes and saying, "Nate, do you think she'll ever come back for us?" I didn't answer, because deep down, I knew the truth. That woman in the truck wasn't our mom anymore. Grandma Margaret wrapped us in the kind of hug that could almost trick you into thinking everything was okay. She smelled like cinnamon and lavender. And when she spoke, her voice had that soft southern hush, like she didn't want to wake the sadness in the room. But the moment we stepped inside, I felt it, a coldness, and it wasn't from the draft. My grandfather, Harold Whitman, stood at the top of the stairs. Thin frame, white hair, eyes like chipped steel. He nodded once, didn't say a word, then turned and disappeared into a hallway. "Don't mind him," Grandma whispered. "He's complicated." Complicated. That was one word for it. My room had one window that looked out over the cornfields. Rows and rows of stalks swaying gently, like green soldiers waiting for orders. There was an old wooden desk, a narrow bed with a lumpy mattress, and a chipped nightstand. Lily's room was next door, decorated with a floral quilt and a cloth doll on the pillow. Grandma had set it all up. You could tell. That night, after unpacking what little we had, Lily curled up on her bed, holding the doll. I sat at my desk and opened my shoebox. The letters, one for every night I couldn't speak my feelings out loud. One for every piece of me left unanswered. I wrote, "Dear Mom, you said you'd visit. You said it was temporary. But today, Grandpa Harold didn't even look me in the eye. And Lily's smile is already starting to fade. I hope you know what you've done. Nate." I folded the page, slid it into the box, and tucked it under the bed. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. Grandma tried. She really did. She made breakfast every morning, scrambled eggs and biscuits with jelly. She sang softly while hanging laundry. She told Lily stories about the sparrows in the garden and taught her to knead dough with those steady hands. But Grandpa Harold, he was like a ghost with rules. Every morning at 5:00, he knocked on my door. No smile, no words, just 2 knocks. Then he'd walk down the stairs, expecting me to follow. He didn't believe in idleness, didn't believe in emotion, only structure, science, and silence. At first, I stayed out of his way. I helped Grandma, walked Lily to school, tried to pretend I was okay. But I wasn't. I missed my old room, my old school, my old friends, everything that made me feel like I belonged. At the new school, I was just the quiet kid from out of town. No one talked to me, and I didn't try either. I sat alone during recess, watching kids play tag while I picked at a peanut butter sandwich that tasted like cardboard. At night, I lay awake listening to the wind creak through the eaves. And sometimes, I heard Grandpa Harold talking to himself in his study. His voice was low, sometimes muttering, sometimes sharp, like he was arguing with someone who wasn't there. One afternoon, I passed by the study on the way to the kitchen and paused. The door was cracked open. Inside, the desk was a mess of papers, diagrams, scribbled notes, odd metal parts. There were test tubes, wires, and something that looked like a handmade circuit board. Then I saw it, the notebook, dark brown leather, worn at the edges, sitting under a vintage lamp. Before I could step inside, a shadow moved. "What do you think you're doing?" Grandpa Harold's voice hit me like ice water. I froze. I was curious. He walked over, closed the door with a loud click, and said, "Stay out of this room," then walked away. I wanted to hate him. Really, I did. But I couldn't, because part of me saw the spark behind his eyes when he looked at those blueprints. A spark I recognized. The same one Dad used to get when he told us about his medical research. The same light in his face when he explained how a heart valve worked over breakfast. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to feel that spark again. Around that time, I started noticing something else. Grandma Margaret had always been full of energy, singing, gardening, bustling around the kitchen. But lately, she seemed tired, her movements slower. Her hands shook sometimes when she thought no one was watching. And every morning, after breakfast, she'd take a small bottle from the kitchen drawer and quietly swallow 2 pills with tea. One day, when she went out to hang laundry, I checked the label. The words cardiovascular disease leapt off the folded paper inside. My stomach dropped. That was how we lost Dad. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought of losing Grandma felt unbearable. She was the only adult who hadn't abandoned us. I stayed up, writing again. Dear Mom, Grandma's sick, just like Dad was, and she won't say anything. Lily doesn't notice it yet. She still asks her to sing about the sparrows, but I see it. I see the way she rubs her chest when she thinks we're not looking. You said you'd visit. You haven't. I don't know what's worse, that you lied, or that I still want you to come. Nate. The next morning, I brought Grandma tea in bed before she even got up. She smiled, touched my cheek, and said, "You're just like your father." That was the only compliment I remember getting from an adult in years. But in that moment, it meant everything. And still, the cold part of the house remained untouched. Grandpa Harold's study, his presence, that buried pain none of us talked about. Then, one evening, I stayed up late waiting for him to go to sleep. When the hall light clicked off and the house went quiet, I crept toward the study door. My heart was pounding. I twisted the knob. It wasn't locked. Inside, the room felt frozen in time. A combination of science lab and graveyard. I stepped toward the desk and opened the leather notebook. The pages were dense with diagrams, some of them I couldn't make sense of. Systems, formulas, strange device sketches with arrows and annotations. And on one page, in block letters, "The world doesn't want truth. It wants profit." I stood there, feeling the air shift. Then I heard it. His voice. "What do you think you're doing?" That's when everything changed. Because instead of yelling, he asked, "You think you're smart enough to understand this? You think you're smart enough to understand this?" That's what my grandfather asked me, standing in the doorway of his study. His voice wasn't angry, just measured, like he was testing something. My heart was racing, but I nodded. He stared at me for a long time. Then he walked in, closed the notebook, and said, "If you're going to be in here, then don't waste my time." That was the start of something I didn't see coming. A cold mentorship. Brutal. Quiet. But strangely necessary. The next morning, he woke me up at 5, same as usual. Except this time, instead of sending me to rake the yard or scrub the porch, he pointed to a physics textbook and said, "Page 32. Start there." I didn't ask questions. I just sat down and opened it. Because deep down, part of me was starving for knowledge, for approval, for a reason to matter again. The next few months were a strange rhythm of silence, pressure, and discovery. Harold didn't smile, didn't praise, but he gave me access to ideas, to his tools, to a part of him no one else seemed to know existed. I learned how he used to work in applied physics, how he had once developed early models for clean energy conversion and data trend prediction, ideas that could have changed the world until they were stolen. He told me about the lawsuit, about how his partners took credit, buried his name, and moved on. "The system doesn't reward truth," he said once. "It rewards the ones who play the game better." I wrote that line down, word for word, because I'd started keeping my own notebook now, a mirror to his. Meanwhile, Grandma Margaret kept everything together. She baked, sang, and made Lily laugh in ways I'd forgotten laughter could sound. Lily was still the light in the house, always drawing, always asking questions, always sneaking cookies before dinner. She started calling Harold Grumpy Grandpa. The name stuck. One morning, she walked into his study, completely ignoring the "Do Not Enter" sign, and handed him a bunch of wildflowers. "To make you less grumpy," she said with a grin. I watched from the doorway, expecting him to snap, but he just stared at the flowers, then at Lily, and something softened. For the first time, I saw his eyes glisten, but not every day was soft. There were shadows growing in the corners of the house. Grandma Margaret was slowing down. She still smiled, still sang, but there were more pills, longer naps, shorter breaths. I watched her pause more often, hand pressed against her chest, waiting for the pain to pass. I wrote it all down in a small, blue notebook I kept under my mattress. Monday. She laughed with Lily, but had to sit down after folding laundry. Wednesday. She didn't finish her tea, looked pale. I saw her gripping the sink for balance. Friday. She baked cookies again. Her hands shook. I didn't know why I wrote it. Maybe because I couldn't stop what was coming. But if I wrote it down, maybe it wouldn't catch me by surprise. Then came the October morning that changed everything. The sky was clear. Cold wind rustled the cornfields like a whisper, warning us to pay attention. Grandma was up early, like always. She made cornbread and kissed Lily's forehead. Then she turned to grab the kettle and stumbled. "Grandma," I shouted, catching her before she hit the ground. Her hand was ice cold. Her breath was shallow. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm just tired." But her eyes were already dimming. Grandpa rushed in from the porch. He dropped to his knees beside her, shaking. Margaret, stay with me." But it was too late. She collapsed in his arms. One last smile flickering on her lips, like she didn't want us to be scared. I froze. Lily screamed somewhere behind me. And Harold? He just held her. No tears. But I saw his shoulders tremble, like the whole world had gone silent inside him. The funeral came fast. Rain drizzled as we stood by her casket. The whole town showed up, neighbors, church friends, people she'd taught how to bake or garden or just be kind. Lily and I held hands the entire time, her fingers clenched around mine like she was trying to stay anchored. Every time the church door opened, she turned her head. "She's coming, right?" she whispered. I knew who she meant. "Mom." I nodded. "Yeah, but I was lying. She never showed, not even a call, not even a goddamn letter." That night, I burned one of the letters I'd written her, watched the ashes drift into the black sky from the back porch. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because sadness had started to rot into something else. Resolve. A week after the funeral, Harold sat us down in the living room, the same chair where Grandma used to tell stories. He looked older, smaller, but colder than ever. "I don't have time to coddle you," he said. "From now on, you stand on your own 2 feet." I wanted to scream at him, but I didn't. Because I saw it now, his grief wasn't absence. It was armor. From then on, he trained me like a soldier, woke me before sunrise, made me read physics, systems theory, engineering manuals, no breaks, no phones, no music, no outside world. He cut me off from everything except the idea that one day I might survive this world by being smarter than it. Lily got a slightly softer version, but not much. He made her read 2 math, logic puzzles, even forced her to sit through one of his rants about climate data models. She didn't love it, but she tried. For me, for him, for Grandma. She still found moments to laugh, to draw, to leave wildflowers on the windowsill of his study. Somehow, she still believed we could be a family. I didn't, but I believed in something else now. Purpose. One evening, when Harold had gone out to the hardware store, I sneaked into the study again. I went straight to the notebook. Not to steal from it, to copy it. I spent hours transcribing pages, sketching the systems I didn't fully understand, writing down every formula I thought might matter. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I knew I was building something. Something for me, for Lily, for the part of Grandma that never gave up on us. A week later, Harold caught me. I expected him to explode. Instead, he nodded once, then said, "Then we do it right." And that's how it began. The work, the fire, the obsession, the dream. When I turned 20, I packed everything I owned into one torn backpack. It wasn't much. A few sets of clothes, a half-broken phone, and a leather-bound notebook full of formulas I barely understood but believed in with my whole damn soul. I stood in the kitchen of the old house one last time. The place was quiet. Grandpa was out back inspecting a busted irrigation valve. Lily was upstairs sketching. I wanted to say goodbye, properly, but I didn't know how. Instead, I left a note on the counter next to a half-eaten apple. "I'm going to make people know the name Harold Whitman. I promise I'll come back, for both of you. Nate." Then I walked out the front door and didn't look back. The Greyhound station in Raleigh smelled like burnt coffee and diesel fuel. People passed me without a glance, most of them too busy trying not to fall apart themselves. I bought a one-way ticket with the last of my savings. I didn't have a degree. I didn't have connections. What I had was desperation, and a notebook full of blueprints from a man the world had once discarded. And I was done being discarded, too. My first place was a crumbling studio on the edge of Raleigh. The kind of building where you could hear your neighbors snore through the walls. There were cockroaches. The sink dripped. The radiator wheezed like it was on life support. But it was mine. During the day, I got a job fixing computers at a strip mall repair shop. I was overqualified and underpaid. But they didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer. At night, I sat at a desk made of 2 milk crates and a closet door, studying my grandfather's designs under a flickering fluorescent bulb. I didn't sleep much. Didn't eat right either. But for the first time, I felt something new. Hope. Grandpa's algorithms were decades ahead of their time models that combined physics-based prediction with real-time data flow. I didn't understand them completely, but I knew enough to build a skeleton. I borrowed programming books from the public library, watched coding tutorials on an ancient laptop, posted questions on forums where engineers half the world away answered with emojis and barely coherent syntax. Piece by piece, I built a prototype. My hands shook the first time it actually worked. Just a basic demo, but it predicted a local delivery route's fuel usage more efficiently than Google Maps. It was clunky, buggy, unstable, but it was real, and it was mine. I started writing to Lily again, actual letters this time. "Dear Lily, I'm alive. Barely. But I'm building something. I don't know if it'll work yet. Tell Grandpa I haven't wasted a page, and tell him I'm not done carrying his name." She wrote back. Her handwriting had gotten fancier. She told me she'd started drawing portraits, mostly of Grandma from memory. Said Harold had finally framed one in the study, even though he pretended it was just a scrap. She also wrote, "He says you're smarter than he thought, but don't let that get to your head." I laughed so hard, I cried. About a year in, I tried to pitch my prototype. I went to a tech convention in Raleigh, rented a booth with money I didn't really have, printed flyers at the library, wore the one threadbare blazer I owned. My demo ran on an ancient laptop that buzzed louder than a lawnmower. But I stood there with everything I had on the line. Investors walked by. Some smiled politely. Others didn't even stop. One asked what school I'd gone to. When I said, I didn't finish, he raised an eyebrow and moved on. Another asked who was backing me. When I said no one, He chuckled and walked away. By the end of the day, I'd handed out 2 business cards, both to high school kids who thought I looked kinda cool. I went home that night and threw up from stress. Then I picked up the notebook again and kept going. The rejections piled up. But so did my progress. I refined the algorithm, taught myself UI design, upgraded to a second-hand desktop I bought with saved tips from the repair shop. I started small, offering free predictions to food trucks and small businesses. Some laughed, but one Leo's Pizza bus used my system for a month, then doubled their monthly profit. Word spread. Then, one rainy afternoon, I met a man named David. I was hunched over my laptop in a coffee shop, debugging a loop that refused to behave. My eyes were bloodshot, my fingers sore, and my mind fried. He sat at the table beside me, sipping black coffee and reading a financial paper. At some point, he glanced over and said, "That looks painful." I didn't respond. Then he asked, "What are you building?" I sighed, rubbed my temples, and said, "A machine that sees patterns no one else can." He raised an eyebrow. "Show me." I did. Reluctantly. He listened, asked real questions, took notes, then handed me a card. "Come see me tomorrow," he said. "Bring this thing with you." His office wasn't in some glass tower. It was the back room of a co-working space behind a Vietnamese takeout joint. But inside, it smelled like money and risk. David listened again, watched my prototype stutter through a logistics simulation. Then he leaned back, nodded, and said, "You've got something. Not finished, not polished, but something." He offered $50,000 for 20% of a company I hadn't even named yet. I shook his hand. And just like that, Whitman Labs was born. We rented a corner of the co-working space. I hired 2 other broke developers and a data nerd who thought in code more than English. We slept on beanbags, lived on ramen and Red Bull. But we built, and the system worked. It really worked. Within 6 months, a mid-sized logistics firm used our tool to slash shipping costs. Their testimonial went viral in a LinkedIn post. Within a year, we'd signed 5 more contracts. I'd moved out of the studio. I finally had a decent pair of shoes. And one day, I changed my last name. Ellis had been tied to abandonment. But Whitman, that name carried blood, brilliance, and pain. It was a name worth rebuilding. I mailed Grandpa the legal paperwork. Told him I'd filed patents his name first, mine second. He didn't call, didn't write, but Lily sent a photo a week later. It was him, holding the patent, eyes misted, hands shaking, smile small but real. Everything I was building was working. I was winning. And then, one afternoon, standing in my glass-walled office overlooking the bay, Carrie, my assistant, knocked. "There's a woman here to see you," she whispered. "Says it's personal." I frowned. "Who?" Carrie hesitated. "Says she's your mother. She stood in the lobby like a ghost that had taken too long to show up. Hair streaked with gray. An old cloth bag clutched in front of her like a shield. Shoulders hunched, eyes sunken, worn-out coat 2 sizes too big. "Nathan," she said, voice trembling. I froze. The past slammed into me like a freight train. I saw her turning her back in that red pickup truck. Heard Lily's voice. "She's coming back." Right. I'd built a life out of that silence. Now, she was breaking it. I didn't speak. Not right away. My chest felt hollow, like all the air had drained from the room. I could hear my assistant breathing beside me, hear the hum of the elevators, even the soft beep of a vending machine down the hall. But I couldn't hear myself. She was thinner. Her makeup was faded. But it was her. Rachel. My mother. The woman who'd left me at a wooden doorstep like I was a burden she could finally set down. "Come to my office," I finally said. My voice sounded colder than I meant. She followed, quiet. She moved like someone trying not to fall apart. When we got inside, she sat down on the edge of the chair, like she didn't think she was allowed to be comfortable. I didn't offer her water. Didn't ask if she was okay. She clasped her hands in her lap and whispered, "I don't know where to begin." I leaned back. "Try. Mark. He lied to me." She said, "He took everything. The money your father left, the savings account, the house gone. And when he ran, he didn't even say goodbye." I stared at her. Not a single flicker of sympathy. Not yet. She wiped her eyes. I was stupid, blind, and now I'm broke, alone, and I don't know where else to go. That's when she said it. "I'm sorry, Nathan. I was wrong. I should have never let you go. I should have never left you and Lily." That part, those words, they cracked something, but they didn't fix anything. "You think an apology makes it all go away," I said. "You chose him. You chose to walk away from your children. You didn't just leave, you erased us." She flinched. "I know. I live with it every day." "No. You ran from it every day." I stood and turned to the window. San Francisco glittered in the distance, cold and sharp. "Behind me," she whispered. "I just want your forgiveness." I didn't turn around. I couldn't. "Forgiveness," I said, "isn't a favor. It's earned." I called for Carrie. "Show her out," I said. Mom stood, but her shoulders caved. She didn't argue. She didn't cry again. Just clutched that cloth bag like it was the only thing holding her together. As she walked out, I noticed a tear drop onto the sleeve of her coat. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt nothing, which, somehow, hurt even more. For the next few days, I couldn't focus. I stared at code like it was written in another language. I skipped meetings. My coffee went cold before I touched it. I kept seeing her face, and I hated it, because part of me still wanted a mother, even after everything. I called Lily. She was in her last year at art school in Raleigh, still painting, still full of quiet, thoughtful energy. Mom showed up, I said. There was silence on the other end. Then she whispered. What did she say? That she was sorry. And you? I told her she didn't get to come back just because she's lonely. More silence. Then Lily said something that hit deeper than I expected. I'm angry at her too, Nate. But I still miss her. That night, I opened the box in the back of my closet, the one I hadn't touched since Chapel Hill. Inside the letters I'd written her, stacked, yellowed, unsent. I pulled one out creased, worn, tear-stained. I don't remember which year I wrote it, but it read, Dear Mom. Lily cried herself to sleep again. She keeps asking what she did wrong. I don't know what to tell her. I don't know how to carry this alone. Why did you leave us, Nate? I folded it slowly, put it back, and for the first time in years, I cried. The next morning, I made a call. Not to her, to someone else. I hired a private investigator. I needed to know if she was lying, if this was just another twist in a long line of manipulations. 2 weeks later, the report came in. She was working as a dishwasher in a diner on the outskirts of the city. She lived in a run-down one-bedroom, paid cash rent, didn't own a car, no social life, no new relationship. Just survived. One day, I went there. I stood across the street, watched through the diner window as she wiped down tables. She moved slowly, carefully. No bitterness, just fatigue. She wore a cheap ponytail. Her hands were red from scrubbing. Her shoes were falling apart. She didn't see me, but I saw her, and she wasn't the woman who left us. Not anymore. Weeks passed. Whitman Labs kept growing. We landed a major health tech contract. Our valuation hit the first big milestone. A VC panel featured me as Silicon Valley's quiet builder. None of it felt real. None of it felt enough. Because somewhere in that box of letters, I'd buried the only thing I still hadn't learned to do: heal. So I made a decision. I went back to the diner, waited until she finished her shift, and as she stepped out, squinting against the sunset, I stepped forward. She froze. I didn't say anything right away. Then I looked at her and said, "You can come stay with me. Not because you deserve it, but because we both need to stop bleeding." When I brought her home, she stood at the threshold of my San Francisco apartment like she didn't belong. The building was steel and glass, 20 stories tall. My place was on the top floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, smart lights, minimalist everything. It had taken years to build a life that clean, that controlled. She walked in, her cloth bag still clutched to her chest. She didn't look up at the view, just quietly scanned the furniture, the hardwood floors, the untouched guest bedroom. "This is beautiful," she said. Her voice cracked. I didn't know what to say back, because for the first time since I was 14, Rachel Whitman, my mother, was living under the same roof as me again. The first days were awkward. Not explosive, not warm, just fragile. She moved like a guest, always waiting for permission. She folded blankets that didn't need folding, cooked meals no one asked for, asked about my day, then apologized immediately after, as if even curiosity was a risk. I kept my answers short, polite, hollow. At night, we sat in the same room, 10 feet apart. Me at my desk working, her on the couch knitting in silence. Sometimes she'd open her mouth like she wanted to ask something, but then stop. And I didn't push, because I didn't trust myself not to shout. I called Lily. "She's here," I said, "living with me." Lily went quiet on the other end. "I want to see her," she said, "but I don't know if I'm ready." "You don't have to decide now," she exhaled. "I'll fly out this weekend." Lily arrived on a Friday, still wearing her paint-stained hoodie, a sketchbook tucked under her arm, her hair in a messy bun, her smile hesitant but warm. When she stepped into the apartment, Mom stood frozen. "Hi, sweetie," she whispered. Lily didn't answer, just walked past her and dropped her bag in the guest room. I watched Mom's shoulders sag. The damage was still there, years thick, like rust under fresh paint. The first 2 days were heavy. Lily barely spoke to her. She spent most of her time on the balcony sketching, headphones in, eyes fixed on the skyline. But I caught her watching Mom when she wasn't looking, like she was trying to find someone inside that woman's face she used to know. Sunday morning, something shifted. Mom got up early and made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread. Exactly like she used to when Dad was alive. The smell filled the apartment like a memory too familiar to ignore. Lily walked into the kitchen, froze mid-step, and said softly, "You remember?" Mom smiled through tears. "I remember everything." They sat down, in silence, but they ate. Together, later that afternoon, I found them on the couch. Mom was teaching Lily how to knit. "She taught me this," she said, pointing to the cloth doll Lily had brought all those years ago to our grandparents' house. "Your grandma, Margaret." Lily traced the thread slowly. "She would have loved this place," she whispered. "I know." Mom said. I think of her every day. Lily didn't answer, but she didn't move away either. Things got better. Slowly. Mom started helping me around the apartment, cooking, cleaning, even organizing some of the old files in my home office. Sometimes I'd walk in and catch her staring at the framed patent I'd filed with Grandpa's name on it. Her hand would rest gently on the glass. I'm glad you did this, she said one day. He deserved it, I replied. She nodded. So did you. We still had hard days. Little arguments about groceries. Awkward silences during dinner. Moments when Lily left the room if Mom spoke too long. But healing is messy. It doesn't arrive like a clean slate. It stumbles in, dragging years of dust behind it. One night, I sat down with her. Just the two of us. No distractions. I haven't forgiven you yet. I said. She blinked, I know. But I'm trying. She reached out, slowly, then stopped. Her hand hovered over the table. I don't expect you to. She whispered. I just want to be someone worthy of forgiveness, even if it takes the rest of my life. I nodded, then did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I called her Mom. Her face broke, in a good way. A few days later, I opened a drawer in my office, pulled out the shoebox I'd brought from Chapel Hill, the one with the letters. She was folding laundry in the guest room when I walked in. This is for you, I said, handing her the box. What is it? Years of things I never said out loud. She opened it slowly, read one letter, then another, and another. Her hands began to shake. Tears dripped onto the paper. Then she looked up. Thank you, she said, for letting me read your pain. Something shifted after that. She started smiling more. Lily started staying longer. I found them painting together on the balcony once. Mom trying to mix colors like Lily taught her. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. That week, I brought them both into my office. I had something to show them. On the wall was a new logo design. Whitman Future, it read. Underneath Rebuilding What Matters. Lily gasped. You're expanding. I nodded. I want to take everything we've built and turn it outward. Science education, community workshops, outreach programs for kids like us kids who've been left behind. Lily clapped. Mom smiled. You're doing what your grandfather always dreamed of, she said. No, I said. I'm doing what we dreamed of. Together, but not everything stayed warm. One night, while prepping materials for the new initiative, Mom and I got into an argument. She had mentioned Mark. Casually, offhand, but it was enough. I slammed my laptop shut. Don't say his name. She froze. I didn't mean. You chose him. You stayed with him. He erased Dad. He erased us. Her voice broke. I know. I was weak. I was scared. I thought he was all I had left, and you left us instead. Silence. Then she said, I would take it all back if I could. Every single choice. I didn't speak, because I wasn't ready to let go of that weight. Not yet. That night, Lily called me into the living room. She had drawn something. A cornfield. 3 figures standing in the middle, holding hands. She pointed. That's us. I stared. One figure had my hair. One had Lily's smile. The last had a gray streak in her bun. It wasn't just a picture. It was a hope. A possibility. We were still broken. But we were building. And for the first time, I wanted to believe that healing was possible. 3 months later, I returned to Chapel Hill. The cornfields were gone, replaced by a construction site humming with quiet intention. The old house had been demolished, but the foundation lines were marked in spray paint. still honoring the original blueprint Grandpa drew decades ago. Lily stood beside me, clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning the crew. We were building something real now. Not just a lab, not just a home, but a place for kids who had no one else. A place for dreams that weren't Ivy League bound, but still deserved sunlight. It was called the Whitman Center, and it was born out of fire. A week before the grand opening, I gave a keynote at a tech summit in Austin. Afterward, a man approached me backstage, balding, nervous. Name tag read Dr. L. Markson, Stanford. He extended a hand. "I knew your grandfather," he said. I didn't shake it. He cleared his throat. We read the letter, the one you published in the journal. Your research? The backstory? You buried him," I said. "You all did." "I regret it," he muttered. "Most of us do." I let the silence hang. Then I looked him in the eye. "Then build scholarships. Fund underrepresented researchers. Fix what you broke. Don't apologize to me. Build something better." He nodded. And for the first time, I felt power that wasn't petty, that wasn't revenge, just responsibility. The opening of the center drew more people than we expected. Former students of Grandpa's, local families, a few folks from Chapel Hill who hadn't seen us since the funeral. Mom stood in the corner, wearing a navy blazer, her fingers trembling around a plastic coffee cup. She wasn't used to praise, but people kept coming up to her. "Your husband taught me to code. Your son's changing lives. You raised good kids." She cried, quietly, proudly. Lily gave the first tour. She walked people through the mentorship wing, the free child care room, the podcast studio. I gave the last one, and stopped at the archive. It was a small glass room, just one table, one old desk, one box of blueprints. On the wall hung 3 photos, Grandpa with his students, Mom with us when we were little, and the 3 of us taken just last week standing in front of the new sign. 3 generations, 3 paths back to each other. That night, I found an envelope taped to my bedroom door, Mom's handwriting. Inside was a folded letter and a pendant. The letter read, "Nathan, I was a coward for most of your life. I let grief silence me, let fear replace action. But watching you build this center, watching Lily become herself, I see now that legacy isn't just what we leave behind, it's what we fight for while we're still here. This pendant was your father's. He gave it to me when you were born. I think it belongs to you now. I'm proud of you, son. Love, Mom." I held the pendant in my palm. It was small, rusted. The letter W etched faintly on the back, a symbol of what we lost and what we chose to rebuild. A few days later, Lily and I sat on the roof of the center, watching the sunset spill across the Carolina sky. She asked, "Do you think he'd be proud?" I didn't hesitate. "I think he already was." She nodded. "Do you think we're done healing?" I smiled. "No, but we're not hiding anymore." As we sat there, I saw a group of kids running through the front yard. A boy stumbled, then laughed. A girl helped him up. They were loud, unfiltered, free, and I remembered us, how we used to be, before the silence, before the shame. So if you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you for listening to the story of a kid who was forgotten, of a family that cracked but didn't shatter, of a dream that looked dead but wasn't. Maybe your pain looks different. Maybe your silence lasted longer. But if you're still here, still breathing, then your story isn't over. Not yet. You get to choose what to do with your grief. You get to build something from it. Even if all you have left is one ruined field, one broken letter, one quiet wish, that's enough. That's where I started. And maybe that's where you begin. If this story moved, you share it with someone who needs hope. Like, comment, subscribe, and tell me, what would you build from your broken pieces? Let's talk below.